Thank you for joining us and welcome to the second Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America's Access webinar series this year, labeled for success, What Goes into a Label? This is the fourth webinar in this series of virtual programming created to be a resource for craft, startup, and small production wine and spirits brands. This is also the first step in WSWA's Access's Road to Brand Battle. The information shared by today's panelists will provide competitors with better insight into what wholesaler judges are looking for and how to best tell their brand story through packaging. For those who want more information on applying to compete in the 2021 WSWA Brand Battle Tournament, visit www.wswa.org/brand-battle. Today, we have a captivating panel of experts who will discuss the elements that go into a thought-provoking and compelling label. These are the wine and spirits branding thought leaders who have mastered consumer engagement with a combination of imagery and words. They call it creative design, but you may call it art. I love a beautiful label. I think we all enjoy being drawn to them. After all, we and our customers drink with our eyes and minds first, and that starts with the label. While I can add my perspective as both a wholesaler and brand developer, I know you'll appreciate hearing from the talented, tenacious, and successful brand developers we have with us today. So, whether you are joining us live or watching this as a recording, and you want the answer, you want the cheat code as to how a label, maybe even your label, can gain attention and really stand out on the shelf, keep listening. With that, I'd like to introduce today's panel. We have Andre Mack, the first African-American to be named Best Young Sommelier in America by Chine de Rotisserie. He's also the lead designer and notably the founder of Maison Noir Wines. Next, we have Jeff Kozak, CEO of WhistlePig Whiskey. He is an industry veteran and a label trailblazer with that adorable little pig on the bottle. Additionally, we are joined by Lauren Blanchard, a wine and spirits brand builder and general manager at the Savage & Cook Distillery in Vallejo, California. Welcome and thanks for being here. Now, before we officially begin, I'd like to ask the panelists to share with our audience members a little elevator pitch for your brands, for those who are unfamiliar and may not know as much as they think they do. Andre, let's start with you. Give us a little spiel about your brand.
My brand is called Maison Noir Wines. You know, my background is restaurants. I worked for Thomas Keller for about 5 years. And for me, I've always wanted to introduce the playfulness. Wine was always this place, especially from my background where I came from, was pretty buttoned up, and for me, I wanted wines that evoked emotions and kind of had this feeling of welcoming, and I felt by not putting my name on the front, not calling it Andre Mack Estates, that that wouldn't resonate with people, but something like Love Drunk, I think that means something to us all. And so for me, it was more about being more inviting into wine and less pretentious.
I love that. I love that universal connection to others. Next, Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about WhistlePig?
Sure. Yeah, WhistlePig, we're a small craft whiskey company based out of Vermont. We're on a 500-acre farm. We distill from grain to glass. The two labels that you have shown up here are, the original label that WhistlePig was founded on. And so we can get into a little bit about that. And exactly like Andre said, 10 years ago, rye whiskey was old dead guys on bottles. And we were one of the first brands that tried something new, and this name WhistlePig and an image of a pig, smoking something was where we started. On the right is, today's label, which is probably a lot more sanitized, but there was a lot of soul in that first label. On the left, there was a lot of things wrong with it. It said 10 years. 10 different times, and every expert would have said that that was not the right way to start a brand, but something stuck. So there's a reason we're still around 10 years later. We're still having a lot of fun. We're just maybe professionalized it a little bit, but we haven't lost our soul. So that's a little bit about where WhistlePig came from, as along the label journey.
Jeff, I love that soul. I think especially nowadays, we're all yearning for products with soul and identity, things that we can connect to. Lauren, can you tell us a little bit about Savage & Cook?
Absolutely. So Savage & Cook, we are a brown spirits distillery based on Mare Island, which has a lot of history to it. Our labels were all created and designed by Dave Finney, who's the owner. He's the creative genius and force behind them. He's known for envelopes that, for labels that really push the envelope. And the focus is really more on the art and the design rather than technical information. So while the labels are minimalist in terms of information, they really do provoke you, and they inspire emotion, and they really make you stop and think. So for us, it was much more important to have that creative expression that would cause the consumer to, stop, think, interact with the bottle, and try to, learn and discover and want to know more, versus the technical information. So that was the route that we took with these bottles.
That's great. I love that, and provoking curiosity for the consumers. And Lauren, hold on to that thought, because I'm going to swing right back around. I'm going to start with you on this next question. So I'd like all of the panelists to tell us about your labels. We talked about your brand as a whole comprehensively, but let's dive into the label. And I know in conversations you and I have had, you've mentioned even the shape of the bottle makes a difference, which is something that maybe our audience members hadn't considered. Can you tell us a little bit more about that label?
Yeah, sure. So, so for each of the labels, I mean, we really start from scratch, and Dave tries to come up with an image that not necessarily connects with the liquid inside of the bottle, but an image that we feel is representative of the entire project and the brand. And it's really important to, to think about how that label is going to live and exist with the whole family of brands, and in the family of competitors that we're with as well. So there's a lot of detail and a lot of time and consideration that goes into that. The labels tend to be based on real images that were in some way altered, and it gives that sense of like, I think I know what I'm looking at, but I want to learn more. I want to know more. And then when the consumer picks up and they can see the back label, we have some information on there, certainly more than the front, but it really is a discovery kind of brand where, you've got to go online, or you've got to ask some questions, or you sort of have to be in the know. It's not all out there and all immediately apparent.
And I have visited the Savage & Cook website, and I would encourage everyone to visit the website, because you do have a lot of really fascinating information there. For instance, mentioning that there's a lot of history at that Mare Island location. You have it on the website. It's terrific. As someone who is constantly Googling brands to try to find more information, I thank you. And can you also tell us really quickly, you had mentioned that the importance of having, a similar design or thread between all of the SKUs. What products do you offer? I know you guys distill brown spirits, right?
Yeah, so we have 3 different whiskeys. We have Second Glance, which is an American whiskey. We have Lip Service, which is our rye, and the Burning Chair, which is our bourbon. And then we have a couple of other seasonal offerings. But when we look at these labels, not just as a singular existence, I mean, we really do look at it as a family. So when we think about a new creation or something, a new label that's going to be introduced to the family, it's got to work within the family. And because we don't have our name Savage & Cook splashed all over the bottle, there has to be a visual cue that could let the consumer or the distributor or the trade person know that this all belongs to the same family of products. And it's a very fine line to walk, because you do want to put the information out there. You don't want to make it too hard for people to understand what you're trying to communicate. But for us, we just love that discovery element, and it's why we don't brag about like the fact that this distillery is in a building that's 150 years old. Like, it's something that you'll discover, And there's lots of little pieces that will unfold over time.
I love that. And I love that since it's all whiskeys, the consumer can very easily make that connection in the liquor store.
Yeah.
Jeff, how about you? Can you tell us about your label?
Yeah, I mean, I was just reminiscing when we first designed that label. It was done by a college kid at a liberal arts college called Middlebury here in Vermont, and I think we paid him about $100 to do it. And I mentioned that thought about soul in your label, and again, I think you only have a couple of seconds to communicate to a consumer, what your brand is about, and so. An image like a pig, a somewhat whimsical name like Whistle Pig, and then, that comment about rye or 10 years, that was the consistent themes, right? Lauren's right, you can't put everything on the label that you want to tell a consumer, your history or all the other facts that they should discover. But if you don't convey your three strongest pieces, whether it's functional or whether it's that element of the soul you're trying to, at least show your consumer, you'll never get there. So again, I think, the original label for Whistle Pig was super simple. It was different, and it just resonated. So whenever we go and design something new within our range or hierarchy, like Lauren said, it has to fit with that original, building block, right? They need to connect back to where the consumer first was introduced to your brand, or where they first saw it. A couple of our Boss Hog bottles are up here on the screen. You can see that the original Boss Hog was, tied more closely to Whistle Pig's first 10-year version, and then it created a new identity on its first iteration in black. And then that theme of black and pewter toppers has been, consistent. Each one is collectible and slightly different, but everybody knows a Boss Hog bottle when they see it, and they know that, again, it's going to be something different than they've ever experienced before. So, that's a little bit of some of the rules that we kind of align ourselves with when we're developing labels for the Whistle Pig brand.
And Jeff, you had mentioned that you only have a few seconds to capture the consumer's attention, and that's such an important point. I speak with friends and family members who aren't in the industry, and I have a neighbor who lives across the hall. She's not in the industry. Her and her husband love to drink, and oftentimes they'll tell us about a new whiskey they bought, and I say, well, what made you buy that one? And inevitably they say, I don't know, I just like the label. So it's a really important point. Andre, how about you? Can you tell us about your label?
Yeah, sure. Mine was pretty simple. We didn't have any rules or anything like that. I mean, I just, walking down or walking into a wine shop, there's just a sea of colors. And for us, we thought black and white was pretty stark. It screamed. To talk about the 15 seconds that Jeff talked about was like, it's like right there in your face. It says love drunk. It's screaming. It's black and white. And so for me, it was just that simple. I mean, it's designed to look like my kid did it. So for us, we wanted to convey playfulness. Even though, I'm serious about my craft, I don't take myself serious. So in that sense, what we wanted the brand to be was like, it's fun, it's playful. It's most of it's in screw caps, right? It's like twist the party and get the party started. And I would have to say that you wouldn't notice it by what we designed, but Dave Finning and what he created with The Prisoner, I was always a big fan of. And my work doesn't look like it, not this work, but he definitely was an inspiration when it came time to figure out what I was going to do with my own. For me, walking, as a child walking into the grocery store, there used to, I think I told you before, there was what we called the generic aisle, and you would walk down this aisle and everything was white. And so like we would go down every single aisle and it would kind of be like a mosaic of colors. And then you would hit this one aisle and it would just almost be blinding because everything was packaged in white and it had black letters and like Helvetica, and it just said beer or potato chips. And it was something about that when it came time for us to come up with the branding for this project, was just to, just keep it simple, right? Just keep it simple. The idea that like everything that we had went into what's inside the bottle. The packaging is supposed to look like it was a last minute effort, if you would. I mean, it kind of was, right? If I have to tell the story. But for me, it was just stark black and white, and it jumped out. To me, it screams playfulness. It screams like it's fun. And that was the biggest thing that we wanted to convey. And the fact that like there is really no information about the wine on the front. You know, people were more likely to buy it once they pick it up. And so I didn't know that until afterwards. I think it's like 30%, 29% or something like that. So for us, it was kind of the same thing. If you knew, you knew. There's something about that, being in that club and having more, getting more information about it. And along the way, it feels like that they discovered you. And that's a feeling. You think about it, it's the same way with when your favorite band is like, you know, playing the Super Bowl, it's not cool anymore. But when you and only a select group of friends were listening to them, you know, you felt like you were part of this thing. And then once they kind of made it big, you kind of let them go. And so the idea of being a part of this club and being able to discover something that didn't have a lot of information on it, that might look, you know, people might pass over on the shelf, I mean, was kind of part of the plan.
Well, Andre, I have 2 points to make. The first one, I want to throw a little praise your way because there's something that you're not saying here. And that's that you also designed the, I mean, so you're the designer of the labels. But what I think is so important about that, and in our conversation, you had mentioned that you had started this brand in 2009, right? And because it was a startup, you didn't have the money to hire a graphic designer. And so you had to bootstrap it and figure it out. And the reason why I think that's so important, especially for our audience members, is because not only do we have probably other wholesalers in the audience, but we also have suppliers. We also have entrepreneurs and newcomers. And part of the power of today's webinar is really demystifying this process of creating a label and what goes into it. And I think your story is so powerful because it really demystifies the process that sometimes you just gotta figure it out. I'm sure you did tons of Google searches and you just stayed up late trying to design these labels, am I right?
Absolutely, but you know, there wasn't much, I mean, this is 07, so YouTube just started, so there wasn't a lot of information on it, but like, I grew up in the era of punk rock and skateboarding. You made your own stickers, you made your own stuff. And for me, it was just like, you just do it. You know, now I have a lot of clients that come to me and they say, you know, we want to time this logo like the Rothschilds, you know, or something like that. And it's like, but what's timeless, right? Timeless means that they stood the test of time. It's actually the work that they put in that actually made the logo mean something. And you know, so you can change these over the years. And so for me, it just felt like I'm just going to make it myself, right? I mean, I didn't have $25,000 for branding, right? I didn't have $25,000 for cork, for glass, for grapes, none of that, you know? And so it just felt like I'm just going to do it myself. And, you know, maybe that's the charm of it. I don't know. I mean, I bought it, you know, an old iMac off of Craigslist for $200. You know what I mean? That's literally how I started. And I stayed up watching videos and staring at the screen for hours from 10:30 to 4:30. And that's kind of how I did it. And then within 2 years, I started a design company called Get Fresh Crew, and we do design work for lots of different people in the industry.
The more I hear from entrepreneurs and business folks alike, the more I realize that there really aren't many secrets. It's more about buckling down and getting it done. It's all hard work, right?
Yep.
You brought up another important point that I want to toss to the group. You brought up playfulness and music and art, incorporating it into your label. And that's something that I've seen as a common thread with all of these labels. You all have a sense of whimsical. It's very whimsical. There's playfulness. Really, I see that the common thread is blurring the lines, you know, stepping out of your box. Am I accurate in that, Jeff? Can you talk a little bit about that, being playful with the brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super interesting for us because we're, you know, kind of deemed a luxury brand because our price point on the 10-year is over $80. But yeah, the playfulness, right? If you can do that at a luxury price point is even more interesting for consumers because what people, you know, now equate to luxury isn't what it was in the past, right? So whether it's the history or whether it's, I think somebody mentioned Rothschild. I mean, again, it's back to, you know, I think there's a new definition of luxury and it can be more fun and it doesn't have to be Swarovski crystals, you know, and blazoned on a bottle. So yeah, definitely. everybody, again, it's a serious world, and COVID made it more serious. I think if there's some fun on your bottle or on your label, I think that goes a long way.
Love it. Lauren, do you have anything to add on that about the playfulness and art?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we certainly have a lot of fun with the labels and with the entire package coming together. I mean, that honestly is one of the most fun processes associated with what we do here. But I think it's, overall, it's just really important to portray your personality. And so whether that's playful or more serious, or somewhere that walks the line between, it's really important to stay true to your brand and what you want to communicate. So even if you see lots of other brands going in the playful direction or the serious direction or whichever direction that may be, I think it's important to just make sure that you're staying true to your brand and not jumping onto any trend in any way or another. Just stay true to your own personality.
That's a great segue, Lauren, for the next question. So I love hearing those origin stories, and thank you all for sharing those. So we know what your brands put on their labels, but let's speak in general terms for a minute. If you were speaking to an entrepreneur or a newcomer who had questions about creating a label, what would you tell them should go onto a label, and what makes for a great one? Andre, let's start with you.
Oh, that's a tough one. I think, I guess that my thing is that I don't think there's any hard cut rule. I think like you follow what's in your heart, and I guess for me, I don't answer to, I'm kind of like the top of the pyramid. So like once I'm done designing, like it's done, right? There's a little bit of feedback, but like after that, that's it. There's not a lot of going back, and like, you'll know when you're done. And I say, really be true to who you are. I really don't have any other kind of advice. If your brand is playful, then put that in the label. Those kind of things. But other than that, I don't have any real thing to offer except do it, go for it. You can always change the label, you can always change your branding, see what works, and change. Be fast, be nimble.
And on that point, did you ever have to change your label after you had already gone to market?
Oh, absolutely. I was in a legal battle with Mouton Rothschild for 6 or 7 years. So yeah, I did.
Interesting. Yeah. We'll get to that in one of the next questions. Hold on to that. Jeff, what about you? Is there anything that you would tell a newcomer what should be on a label and what makes for a great one?
Yeah, I guess Andre has no rules, but I think we have a couple, so I'll give them to you. We always have this one where like the consumer has to be able to see the label name and be able to pronounce it. So we'll take a label and put it in a dark room, preferably that looks like a bar, and make somebody say the name and call it like they're sitting in a bar. So if they can't see it and they can't say it, or they don't feel comfortable, then don't do it, right? Again, it's got to be something that not only will make them buy it the first time, but buy it the second time. So I think, again, it's got to be relatively simple. Don't be too cute. Second one is just, the label should, give you an idea of where the price should be on that product, right? If you're guessing, is it $20 or is it $100? Then you should probably try and narrow it in with some cues. And then, one of our own rules is just that, back to this whole, concept of soul or personality, we try not to use, sub branding like Doublewood for whiskey, right? There's no, I don't think consumers need another Doublewood whiskey. So if WhistlePig was a fun brand to begin with, then it should remain a fun brand, and we'll use, a sub brand like Piggyback, which was a recent whiskey we launched a couple of years ago. A Piggyback, that's fun, it's sticky, it takes some cues from the original WhistlePig name, and it doesn't take itself too seriously. So, again, I think it's back to that personality that the original brand has established, and you have to kind of double back on it.
Yeah, and I think to your point with something like Piggyback, the consumer even reading it on a menu, they can make the connection that it's probably close to WhistlePig. It's part of the same family.
Yeah.
Lauren, do you have anything to add on that about what should go onto a label and what makes for a great one?
Yeah, I just want to highlight, again, representing your own personality. It's a crowded category, no matter what category you're entering, whether it's wine or white spirits or brown spirits. I mean, these categories are all very crowded at this point. So you want to be unique, you want to be eye-catching, and you want to portray your own personality. One other thing that we've discovered is you cannot rush the creative process. So when you have these deadlines that you've got to meet, and when you put this this pressure on yourself, oftentimes you aren't able to come up with the best product. So we always find that whenever possible, to take your time with the creative process, and not just in terms of the label and what that's going to look like, but giving yourself time to put the whole package together in its totality, looking at the glass, the closure, how it fits on a back bar, how it fits on a retail shelf, really taking your time, because it's always better to do it right if you can the first time than having to go back. But a lot of times you've got outside pressures, but as much as you can, take your time with it. And Natalia, I'm interested to hear, sort of your thoughts on this question, and what makes you and your customers gravitate towards, one particular bottle over another.
Well, what calls my attention might be different from what calls a consumer's attention. Really, in my world, my job is creating cocktail recipes for bars and restaurants. And so when faced with thousands of brands in our in our R&D lab, I'm constantly picking up bottles to see what kind of information I can find about the liquid in the bottle itself. And if it's not there, of course, I'm hoping that it's listed on a website. But really, that's what I'm looking for. As far as my customers, the bar operators, the owners, a lot of them are looking for something that's eye-catching, for sure. It was maybe 2 weeks ago, a customer had asked me about a tequila that would be budget-friendly for his menu. And when I recommended a tequila brand, he looked at the bottle and he says, "That doesn't look like it should go on a shelf. That looks like it's going to be stuck in a well." He said, "That's fine." He's like, "But I don't want to put it on my shelf." And that instantly made me think how important it is for an operator to see a beautiful label if they want to, if they do indeed want to portray it in their back bar. And Lauren, you brought up a good point. I'm going to pivot just for a moment here, because you had mentioned how important it is on a label to represent your brand's own personality, that it's unique and it's eye-catching. But I feel like COVID has scrambled things a bit for all of us. I'm sure we've all seen that sales have really skyrocketed in the off-premise. And in the on-premise, many consumers are buying cocktails to go, for instance, or they're eating outside and they're not able to physically see those bottles on the back bar. Has that been something of a concern or consideration, or even part of a conversation? I'm curious to know if that has, if that's been a challenge or something to think about, how to communicate the identity of your brand when the consumer can't physically see it behind the bar. Lauren, have you had to face that?
Yeah, it's certainly been, an interesting 12 months. I think we can all agree to that. Previously we had really relied on the bartender community and, the server community to communicate, information about our brand in the on-premise. Certainly we've had to switch a lot of that focus to the off-premise at this point. And instead of, really relying on the bartenders and those educators within the restaurants, we're now sort of putting that attention on the off-premise and really trying to, to teach and inspire the people working on the floors, the stewards, to really get behind the brand and understand it. We've also seen that the needs of the on-premise are changing. It's not necessarily now that they need to have 20 or 30 different bourbons on the back bar, but they want to have 10 that really sell. So, we're really trying to become one of a fewer set. And then I would say additionally, we've been just creative in what we've done here. So we released for the first time in October a bottled craft cocktail, which technically fits into the RTD category, but we were very thoughtful and very careful in how we approached that, because we understood and we saw just, from our own personal experiences that you can't go to your favorite bar and simply order your favorite cocktail. So the way that people are behaving and the way that they're buying and consuming alcohol is a lot different because of COVID. So yeah, it's been a year of constant change and constantly, trying to understand and keep up and produce at the same time. So I would say yes, absolutely to that question.
And that's also insightful of you to mention how operators are really trimming their stock. We've been seeing that a lot here in Illinois, that operators overwhelmingly say they want to scale back and just go to those core brands that really are part of their bar's identity. Andre, do you have anything to add on that about trying to communicate your brand's identity even through COVID and outdoor dining and limited indoor seating?
Yeah, totally. When we started to keg wine, we made coasters, right? Because there was no way to be able to see our wine being poured at the table or anything like that. And so what we did now, we just kind of ramped up production of that, and we sent coasters. Anybody who was pouring our wine by the glass, and now that it was outside and they were pouring them inside, we sent coasters. Anybody that was canning wine for restaurants to go programs, we sent stickers with our branding on it. And that hopefully that was a way to be able to convey, that they were drinking something that was made by us.
100%. And the fact that the coasters are something that is actually useful for the operators. Correct. Because everyone's trying to reel in all their expenses. So anytime you can offer an operator something that they can use goes a long way. And I can say from my experience speaking with all these operators in this last year, I've never seen bartenders and operators more grateful than I have this last year for everything that the suppliers have offered them. So yeah, kudos to you for that. And Jeff, do you have anything to add on that, on trying to communicate your brand's identity through these COVID lockdowns?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's back to what Lauren and Andre said. You just have to be super nimble. When cocktails to go started happening, in Vermont, we do a lot of maple syrup here. We actually barrel age maple syrup, and we used to, provide it to on premise as a way to, enhance their cocktails. So when cocktails to go started happening, we started taking 375 bottles that were, previously used for maple syrup, putting a small portion in there that would make a cocktail to go and sending them down, to restaurants in Texas. And they would then fill with Piggyback or Whistle Pig and have a premium cocktail to go with a couple other ingredients. But, we had, adjusted their cost by providing the maple syrup, give them a vessel that was branded Whistle Pig, and again, gave the consumer another experience other than a styrofoam cup. So again, with COVID or however we come out of COVID and on-premise opens up, I think those little initiatives, which don't have to be, large scale, they do buy, a lot of promise, and it doesn't take much to do that. So again, very simple, great execution, great branding. And again, it's just a quick pivot. And again, how we come out of COVID and how we help operators remains to be seen, but for sure, we'll be trying things like that in the future.
And you really highlight the many hats we all have to wear. I mean, you as a supplier, you're thinking about the consumer bringing value to them, the operator bringing value to them, also delivering on your bottom line. You got to think about your own business, trying to reconcile everyone's needs. It's not an easy thing.
But at the bottom of the day, it's the people in operations that always end up being screwed, right? They're the ones that are filling. What, you want us to fill a bottle of maple syrup, a quarter full, and send it to Texas? What are you guys, crazy? So again, it doesn't work unless everybody pitches in. But I do think there's always going to be opportunities like that, especially with the rules and the landscape changing with cocktails to go in the different states and the different legislation that's happening right now.
Yeah, coordinating all those moving parts is not easy for sure.
No.
And really, I'm curious. I don't know if this is a thing. I've been thinking about this. I thought about this last night, and I wonder if there's a trend happening right now where in the past, it seems like consumers would discover a new brand after seeing it on a back bar or trying it in the cocktail at their favorite watering hole. And then they'd go to the liquor store and say, I want to get that brand. And I wonder if maybe what we're seeing is a change where now the consumer, since we're seeing so much demand for off-premise sales, if they're being introduced to brands and those captivating labels, in the supermarket and then asking for the brand at their local bar. It's interesting. I'm not sure if any of you had, I'll throw that to the group. It's my own thinking from last night, but have you thought about that at all?
I mean, I'll go first. I mean, I think, again, you know, the bartenders, you're right, used to be the gatekeepers. And if they thought your brand was cool, then obviously they're going to, you know, 10x it to the consumers that are coming through their establishment. You know, now the retailers are a bit of that gatekeeper. E-commerce, again, also is becoming a new gatekeeper. We used to keep track of whether our brand was cool based on the number of whistle pig tattoos that bartenders took on. So maybe we'll have to change that, and it'll be how many retailers can we get the whistle pig logo on, you know. But again, I agree, it's a changing landscape, and you got to keep pace.
Andre and Lauren, I'll give you an opportunity to respond before moving on to the next question.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it certainly is. It certainly is changing, but you know, as restaurants and bars and, you know, on premise in general opens up more and more across the country, I think that, you know, as a brand, Savage and Cook will shift our focus back there, because you can only communicate so much through a label. I mean, you can do your very best job, but you can't tell a story like somebody would tell a story across a bar. So, you know, our focus will shift back to, you know, supporting those bartenders and supporting those establishments, and, you know, doing what we can to, you know, tell the story through those people, rather than solely relying on the label, because that's a pretty tall order for your label.
Yeah, and hopefully we don't have to wait too long for that shift to come back.
Yes.
Andre, do you have anything to add before I move on to the next question?
No, nothing really. I come from restaurants. You know, we build our brand in restaurants, and, you know, I want to be back there to help support them get back on their feet. And, you know, and nothing, retail's great too. I love all you guys too. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. So I don't really have anything to add, except, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing everybody.
Same. Okay, let's talk about trends, because that's always very important. All right, what labeling trends have you seen that have either inspired you or at least made you perk up? I'm thinking all the way from the classic stamped label to augmented reality. Lauren, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's so much innovation in the category right now, which it's really exciting to see. I would say that from our standpoint, we're more of an observer, because it's not really, you know, quite in line with our brand to do something like augmented reality or you know, a label that you peel back and then you find more and more information. So for us, like, I think it's just really interesting and exciting to see all the changes happening and to see all these different you know, creative minds coming together with all this innovation. But again, for us, we're just, you know, I guess sort of more classic in art and design. And while we can appreciate that, you know, we're just gonna, you know, continue doing what we're doing, because that's, you know, what seems to ring true for us.
Awesome. Sticking to your core brand, and that'll be my segue to the next question. So hold on to that. Andre, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, what I see that's kind of interesting to me is labels that kind of market it as a lifestyle. I think, you know, that's always interesting. You know, I told somebody, it's like, you know, seeing labels that look like Instagram pictures, right? In the way that, like, kids interact, and it gets people's attention. Now, I've been a fan of that. I'm just kind of watching. Same thing, Lauren said, you know, I'm just kind of observer and seeing what's out there. You know, our labels have been around I haven't done anything in 12 years. So I'm kind of itching to do something else. And you'll probably see that come here shortly. But no, it just, you know, just how wine is being packaged more of a lifestyle. There's less words, you know, just a picture, which, you know, what they say, a picture, you know, says 1,000 words, you know, and so seeing just an image, and you're starting to see that, I'm starting to see that trend more and more, you know, which just kind of caught my eye.
Well, and consumers, I would say, are more and more interested in trying new products, especially with the rise of direct to consumer.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, do you have anything to add on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think your point about the rise of direct to consumer. So if your label can, again, engage with the consumer. So, you know, QR codes used to be dead 10 years ago. Now they're coming back. Again, I think it's a way for the consumer to find out more about your brand, but then also for you to be able to get them into your loop so you can offer them exclusive offerings through your e-com site, or discounts or codes. So again, if a consumer is more comfortable going through a QR code than going to a website or putting his email in, I mean, ultimately you just want more engagement with them. And so if that label or the technique allows you to do it, I think that's great, because the consumer wants more and so does the supplier, and they want to offer more. So any level of increased engagement through any type of technology, I think, is going to be great. I do agree with Lauren. You can't be too, if it becomes too quirky or too weird, you'll probably turn off people in that way. So that engagement has to be authentic back to the brand.
Well, and that increased engagement with the QR codes, for instance, that's valuable feedback. You can see how many people engaged at what time of day. It's really interesting and valuable data to have. All right, let's jump to the next question. I'm hearing the importance of stated and understated elements, but without a doubt, a label should be engaging. It should tell a story and have visual appeal. The road there, however, isn't always easy. Andre, I'm going to start with you on this with your label issue. Tell us about hiccups you encountered along the way, and perhaps for those delving into the design process themselves, how those hiccups could be avoided during the label development process. What have you all learned? Andre, can you start? I want to hear more about that change that you had to do.
I'm impatient. I think for me, it was just like wanting, I was chomping at the bit, wanting to get this thing out and in the hands of people. And, I didn't do the due diligence of researching, nor did I even copyright anything at the beginning. Right. It was just like, okay, those are things that I probably should do. Was there a budget for it? Probably not. But for me, I just said, I got to do it. I just, for me as an entrepreneur, I had to make it real. And I think those are some of the things, if I had to go back and do, that I would do. Right. It's like, do your due diligence, see if you can copyright the things. And if there's some issues out there lying around that, some landmines that you don't want to step on later. And my whole thing with legal battles that I've had in the past, it doesn't matter if I copyright it or not. It didn't matter. I don't even want to get into that, but like the idea of that means, it's like, I would have done that earlier. It probably wouldn't have saved me anything, but I would tell most people, go down that route, pay your attorney, copyright everything to make sure you own it. And don't think small, copyright it worldwide, just not in the United States. And that way you can lock everything up. But that was, that would be my biggest thing for people, is like, do all of this stuff. Don't skip those steps, because in the end, they can come back and bite you in the ass.
I had an old boss who was in the Navy, and he always used to tell me, measure twice, cut once. Jeff, do you have anything to add on any hiccups maybe you experienced along the process, or hiccups that you would encourage others to avoid?
I mean, Andre's right. The trademark piece. I mean, the worst thing is to fall in love with the name and then realize you can't trademark it, and you just burn time, right? So definitely that's number one. Also, he's right think about scalability, or even automation. Like if you design a label or a product and then you realize you can't scale it to whatever your eventual case goals are, then you should just stop and pause, right? So again, if you're trying to be, a small micro brand, then you can go as crazy as you want. If you eventually wants to be, commercially viable, then you got to think twice about how does that packaging fit together, and can it be automated? And then again, once you get through all those, don't let the designer or the process suck all the fun out of it. You are giving birth to a brand. So once you've got your trademark and once you can scale it, then make sure that you do everything to make it your own, right? So we use a lot of designers, and again, they work with a lot of other suppliers. And at some point, if you let them take complete creative control, they'll basically design something like your competition. So again, you have to maintain your own personality and your own soul through it, even when you start to professionalize. Otherwise, again, you'll just end up like everybody else on the shelf. It'll be a perfectly designed label, but it'll have no soul.
Or, yeah, you could end up resenting that label. I imagine you've looked at thousands and thousands of your bottles, and if you didn't like the label, you'd probably be upset after a while.
Yeah, and you would have spent a lot of money doing that. So again, I think, yeah, it's back to that soul or personality has to be maintained no matter how big or how you evolve over time.
Lauren, do you have anything to add about any hiccups maybe you encountered along the way or your team encountered?
Yeah, I mean, I think just adding on to, what Andre and Jeff have already mentioned, just kind of slowing down to make sure that you're completing all of the various tasks, whether that's legal or compliance or, design, just slowing down. Don't rush the process too much. I know we're all anxious and we all want it right now, but the details are really important. So it's not just about designing the label or buying the glass, but it's choosing the paper stock. It's making sure that you go to the press checks. It's all those little details along the way, because you can create the greatest label, and then if you blow off the press check, it's not going to come out the way that you had envisioned it in your head. So I think it's really important to to spend time on the details, and then in addition to considering how it fits in with your family of other brands, again, how it fits in with the real life. How does it look on a shelf? How does it look in a bar during the day? Or, as Jeff was mentioning, how does it look at, on a bar, in a dark bar at night? So just really thinking about how your consumer and, how the trade is going to experience it, not just, sitting at your desk looking at the bottle in that one particular point, but don't skimp on the details.
I cannot emphasize that enough. The details are so important. I am reminded every single day when I speak to bars and operators and I see their cocktail programs and I see, gosh, just changing the glassware or changing the ice can make such a difference, or even the way you stir. But the details I found overwhelmingly really make the difference between something that's and something that's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Now, I'd like to ask questions that were posed by the audience members. And these questions I'll ask to the group as a whole. So feel free to chime in. Let me see here. Okay, well, the first question, what are you going to do differently now that restaurants and bars are opening up across the US? We might have kind of already talked about that, but is there anything that you all would like to elaborate on?
I'd say for us, it's just a reshift of focus and priorities. And while during this last year, we were very focused on innovation and on supporting the retail accounts, and of course on premise as much as we can. Now that on premise is really coming back in a big way, and it seems rather quickly. I mean, even just in the last 2 weeks, it seemed like a lot of things are opening up, especially here in our home state of California. We've seen a lot of changes. We'll just be refocusing our efforts and being very sensitive to the needs of the restaurants, because you can't just rush in and expect everybody to want to do new cocktail lists and add things to the back bar. So it's definitely going to take some sensitivity. And of course, while we want to expand our own business, we have to be very careful in how we do that, and make sure that we're being there as a supporter and being able to help these people get back on their feet, rather than just looking at it from what we're hoping to achieve.
Yes, and I think that the coming back to pre-COVID days, it may happen faster than we all anticipate as far as the bars hiring back staff. I mean, I know here in Chicago, people aren't be given much notice. They've been unemployed for a year, and now they got to hit the ground running. So things will move quickly, I think. Jeff or Andre, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I guess I can piggyback on that, like that. I think it is a sensitive thing. I think for us, it's just more about like how we can help, right? What do you need from me to help you? Is it something that we need? Do we need to do a Zoom dinner, or whenever you're ready for me to come out and help, get people into the seats and do dinners? I think for me, it's less about, what I need, and, eventually we'll get back to that. But just, how can we help as a company, whether that's, Zoom or whatever it might be. So just wanting to lend support.
For sure. And I know that's something as a wholesaler, we're constantly telling our customers that we have suppliers that want to help you. Let us help you. That's a great point. Jeff?
No, I think you guys have nailed it. It's all about, that initial support and help, and then probably keeping the message simple, right? I mean, again, everybody's going to be inundated, and you're rebuilding a lot of new relationships too. So I think it's when you're there, be respectful, take your time, and then keep your message simple as far as what the ask is. So one
Great.
SKU instead of 10, right? I guess would be the easy way to look at it.
Yep. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, this is a question from Bob Gunter. He says, I would be interested to hear from the panelists what their perspective is on occasionally refreshing established branding / labels / bottles, especially when there's no apparent or compelling need to do so.
Ooh,
Who's going to make the joke about marketing?
Yeah.
I haven't done it. I think they say you should do it every decade. And who's they? But you see big companies do it. I haven't thought about doing it because there is no compelling need to do so. So I wouldn't, but I mean, who knows? I mean, you guys, I think Jeff, you guys did it. It still looks, it looks the same and has a thing, but it's just, it's just a refresh. I don't know. I might be inspired looking at how you guys have redone your label.
Yeah, we honestly, we redid the labels because we found as the shelf got more crowded, people were bookending bottles. So we ended up trying to redesign to address a problem where we ended up putting the WhistlePig branding and the age statement on the side of the bottle. And initially there wasn't that many ryes in the market when we launched, but as the category got more crowded, you got being put on your side. So again, I think it's also interesting as the, when on-premise comes back, there maybe is less bottles, right? Again, it's a different issue every time. And so,
Did I lose you? All right, are you all back? I may have lost.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Same.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. Okay, Michael Belelo asks, in the creative process, how or when do you start, and how do you know when you are done or finished? Andre, I know you briefly touched on this, that in your gut when you're done. It's on you, and you got it. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, totally. I it's just a feeling that that I have, and it's like, okay, this is it. We could add this or we could add that. Let's not do it. Just like keep it the simpler the better. And I would want to second what Lauren said. It's like you can't really rush it. I still have projects on my computer that I started the process 3 years ago, right? And then then I'll come revisit it. If I feel it, then I continue it. But other than that, I kind of shelve it. Sometimes like I don't know that I'm finished. I have to walk away from it. I'll walk away from it, come back. If I come back and I don't really have anything to add, I'll wait a little bit longer, and then I'll say it's done. Right. So it's just a gut feeling for me. It might be different for everybody else, just who work in a more corporate kind of thingy. But for me, it's just kind of just a feeling that I have.
And Lauren?
Yeah, I think, our dynamic is a little bit different, in that Dave is doing all of the design and all of the labels. So while I can, I try to put together the information in as clear of a way as possible to let him know what the brand is about, what the spirit is going to be, what the profile is, what the pricing is, the whole strategy, so that he can start to think about it. And, I think it's like Hunter said, sometimes it comes together really quickly and sometimes not. So when we put together our homeschool RTD, that whole package came together in about 6 weeks. On the other hand, we've been working on our reserve package for over 3 years, and we're not even close. So the answer of like, when is it done? Dave will say always, it's done when it's done. So, the commercial, adding the commercial pressure of, we've already got this brand sold, or there's so much excitement behind it. It doesn't really matter. You cannot rush the creatives.
That's such an important point. And it's one of those things that you don't really know until you do it for yourself. And a few years back, I did this big charity event that I decided to do it on my own. And I decided to get an artist to design these t-shirts, decided to get over 100 t-shirts made, printed with my own money. And I didn't like the design in the end. And yeah, I can tell you there are probably about 70 t-shirts in my closet right now. And that was not cheap. And I wish that I had taken my time with it and I didn't feel the pressure to wrap it up.
Yeah.
I appreciate your insight, Lauren. Okay, let's get to the next question. Okay, if this is another one from Michael. If the front label is to get people to pick it up, what are your thoughts on content on the back of the label? Informational versus brand position? Jeff, let's start with you.
I guess the back side of the label again is probably one more chance to connect, right? Obviously, you already made your strongest points on the front. So again, the back is probably your last gasp. Again, I think, nobody ever says, I really love that back label. It's so compelling, right? I mean, otherwise they'd be flipping it around on the bar. So again, I think it's probably a little bit, back to when the label's done, the back label probably doesn't get enough attention and it's kind of like just capitulation. So I don't know if there's a good answer for that. And if somebody's got a great back label strategy, then please send it to me and we'll adopt it.
Andre, do you have anything to add?
No, I just second that. If someone has a great strategy, email it to me. You used to think it was informational and now I don't know, but we originally had QR codes back in 2009, 2010, and no one was really, into it. And so it kind of went away, but I don't know, maybe it'll come back. So.
Yeah, and maybe now the QR codes, maybe now they don't live on the label themselves, but maybe they're living on shelf talkers or menus at the bars or restaurants. Lauren, do you have anything to add about back label versus front and informational versus not informational?
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree with the guys and also completely admit that we spend 99% of our time on the front label, and the back label just ends up being most of the time, the landing spot for where all of the compliance information has to go, which is, it's a long list of things. So by the time you add in the government warnings and all of the other, all the other elements that must be on the back label, it's already crowded. So we try to keep it very simple so that you don't have like a very art-driven front label and then a back label that's just full of stuff. So we try to limit it to maybe 2 lines of copy, if that, but we just try to keep it really simple.
Well, and also to all of your points that nowadays everybody has a cell phone. Yeah. So if anyone has a question about what the label is that they're looking at, they could do a quick Google search, which maybe that wasn't the case, several years ago. Okay, let's look at another question. TTB has approved new vessel sizes in the US, 700 milliliter, also 1.8 liter, etc. What's your position on this, and are you looking to move into these sizes?
I'll say we saw the news. For us, it wasn't like huge news or anything like that. We have a custom mold in a 750 milliliter size. We only do one size, and I think just in terms of where we are as a brand, we haven't yet ventured into half bottles or larger sizes or anything like that. So possibly in the future, it's something maybe that would be interesting to us. But right now, we're just laser focused on that one size.
Got it. Jeff, have you given any thought to this?
Yeah, I mean, we've started exporting, or our business has picked up internationally, and so a lot of markets are in 700. So we're maintaining a 700 in those markets and a 750 in the US. I think it would be kind of disingenuous to all of a sudden switch strictly for a cost savings initiative. So right now, there's no plans to switch to 700 in the US market.
And Andre, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm just finding out. So.
Okay. There was another question. It was similar. It looked like this question was asked back to back by someone different, but still related about the new TTB approved change in bottlings. This person asks, how do you think the public will reach now? Maybe, I don't know if it means, how do you think the public will react, maybe, now that the TTB has approved these new bottlings? Lauren and Jeff, have you thought about that, the public's reaction to it? If they'll gravitate towards these new sizes?
I mean, I think if it's a market that was, let's say you're a craft producer in Ireland and you're already selling in a 700 mil and then you're exporting to the US, I think the consumer is going to understand that, right? Again, but I think, again, the rules were changed. I think at the end of the day, you want to make sure the consumer understands what he's buying, right? And so I can only think of craft and how, they should do what's right for their business. And honestly, the consumer, right, needs to think about what he's buying and where it's coming from and make sure he's protecting himself through that purchasing, right?
Got it. Lauren?
I would agree with that. I think that if it makes sense for your international exports, or if you're an international producer shipping to the US, if it makes sense, by all means. But, I received an email from a glass supplier that we don't currently work with, and the headline was "Save money with the 700 milliliter." So that's exactly what we don't want to do. And I think everyone would agree here, like, that's not the point. And that's not really what we're trying to do, is, sort of, flip to a smaller bottle and put less liquid, but charge the same price. So honestly, like, I just don't think it's going to be like that big of a news story, and like really has, very little to zero impact on what we're doing.
Got it. Yeah, maybe.
We would be big fans of 3 liters, though. WhistlePig really wants to sell 3 liters of WhistlePig, but that's just not in the cards right now. So, but that would be my dream, right?
I love it. I love it. We'll bring some over to Breakthrough. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up because we're hitting right at the time. So I want to go ahead and thank everyone for those terrific questions, and thank everyone for joining us today. We'll be making a recording of this webinar available to everyone who has registered and attended today. So please look for that follow-up email and share it. Be sure to engage the WSWA Access program on social media using the hashtag WSWA Access. Additionally, I want to remind all of you who are interested in the 2021 Brand Battle Tournament that you can learn more about this year's competition and apply at www.wswa.org/brandbattle. The conversation doesn't have to stop here. Be sure to save the date, March 30th at 1 p.m. for an intimate educational session with program partner CF Napa Brand Design. Label expert David Schumann will be continuing today's conversation and will be available to answer your questions and provide additional insight. Your exclusive registration link will be sent tomorrow with a recording of this program and additional follow-up resources. Thank you, and thank you all. And thank you to the audience members. And finally, but not least, I want to thank our incredible panel today, Lauren, Andre, and Jeff. I really took away from this the importance of staying true to your own brand, listening to yourself, listening to your gut, take your time, and measure twice, cut once. I think you'll all agree that our panelists have done a terrific job of bringing home that message. Be well, everyone, and hopefully we can all share a drink soon. Cheers.